So we've looked at LX and TPX, so the basic probabilities of death. Then we've looked at how do we sort of work out annuities. We can look up the life annuity from a table, and the same with the assurance. We can look up the whole of life assurance from a table, and then we can work out the term assurances accordingly, or the temporary annuities accordingly by netting off the final part of the annuity. And then we've got this topic to look at, which is how we deal with the acceleration of an assurance, how we deal with an assurance being paid earlier than the end of the year. So that's what we're going to look at now. And then this is kind of the equivalent for an annuity, where we deal with the issue of it not being paid annually, but it being paid, say, more frequently, say monthly or weekly or something like that. So this is the topic we're going to look at now, which is the acceleration of the payment time of the assurance. So remember that if we have the simple letter A, that is the assurance, and that is payable end of year of death, and that's what's tabulated, that's what's important. The reason why we need this adjustment the way we do is because that's what we're given in the table, the end of the year of death. We're not given the table for immediate payable, so we've got immediately payable, we have to work that out differently and remind ourselves of how that formula went. Okay, so the probability there's a death in the first year times V, plus the probability you survive the first year, times the probability there's a death in the next year, times V squared. So we can see from the fact that the V is there and the V squared is there that this is payable at the end of the year. So if we look at the timeline, age X plus 1, age X plus 2, okay, any death in that period results in a benefit here. Okay, that's why it's always V. Okay, but on average the death will happen, and there's no better way of doing this than just say that if you're going to have the benefit payable immediately on death, then on average it's going to be somewhere between, or we're going to assume it's halfway between there and there, or if the death happens in the second year, we're going to assume it's halfway between there and there. Okay, so we want to replace the V here with a V to the half. We want to replace the V squared there with a V to the 1.5. But how do we do that? Well, all we're doing, if we're replacing that V by V to a half and that V squared by V to the 1.5, all we are doing is taking every term in the formula and going divide by V to the half. Well, V, remember, is 1 over 1 plus I. So that is the same as times by 1 plus I to the power of a half. So that is how you move the benefit payment from the end of the year to halfway through the year. So supposing we have age 40, term 20 years, payable on death, then what we want is A, this is the notation, we put a bar over it to say payable immediately on death, and then we're going to multiply the whole thing we get by 1 plus I to the power of a half. Okay, because whenever it gets paid, we're bringing it forward by half a year. And then we just do our formula we learnt in the last section, A40 minus 20p40 times v to the 20 times A60. Okay, and we multiply the whole thing by 1 plus I to the half, and that means that this thing, which is the value of an assurance payable at the end of the year for a 20-year term, is converted by this thing into an assurance payable immediately on death for a 20-year term. Remember that that is a whole of life assurance payable to someone aged 60. That is a whole of life assurance, someone aged 40. That is a whole of life assurance payable to someone aged 60. And this, which appears in both the assurance and the annuity function exactly the same, discounts this 60 20 years into the future, okay? Because we don't just net off the price of an assurance payable to a 60-year-old. This has to be sort of pushed 20 years into the future, okay? So that's what that's doing. Okay, so you've got an assurance payable to a 40-year-old minus assurance payable to a 60-year-old, discounted 20 years into the future, which gives you the temporary assurance, but that whole thing is to the end of the year, so that makes it immediate. Okay, supposing, as a very simple extension then, supposing we just adjust this and it's payable 1 month after death. Okay, well if it's payable 1 month after death, then we've got to discount back. We've got to discount back by a further month. Okay, so in that case, instead of having this, which brings the benefit forward by 6 months, we only bring it forward by 5 months. So it's 1 plus I to the 5 over 12 times A40 minus 20p40 v to the 20 A60. Okay, so that's how you can adjust the timing of the benefit. So it's really quite a simple thing to do, and that gives us now quite a flexible and powerful way of calculating multiple different types of benefit.